Okay, so Poland and the Netherlands have quite intense business cooperation. In terms of investment, Dutch investors were always in top of the investors in Poland. When we look at the statistics in terms of the trade on both sides, import, exports, it looks also quite balanced. So today, my guest is Sanne Kaasjager, Head Economic Department from the Embassy of the Netherlands. Good morning, Sanne.
It's pleasure to be here.
I'm happy that you are here because we have a lot of interesting things to discuss.
We don't have enough time, actually.
Yes, we'll try to be fast and short and sharp and pragmatic, which I think is, the Dutch way of doing business.
I'll do my best.
Yes, so we will take a closer look at the areas of business and economic cooperation and also the initiatives that bring us together. But maybe let's start with the general picture. So can you bring us some statistics in terms of, I know that you prepared some for us today. How does our cooperation look in the figures?
Yeah, well, actually, I did look it up yesterday to our statistical bureau in the Netherlands. And it was surprisingly positive. So last year we had a trade volume of 23.1 billion euros, which is even an increase compared to 2019, which is interesting because we had the corona restrictions. Mm-hmm. So we had growth, nevertheless. This year it will even go through the roof, I would say, because if we extend the trend that it is taking now, our trade volume, then we'll probably get to about 15% growth of our trade volume, which is amazing, of course. So if you would think about, let's say, how it is divided, you would see that Poland exported around 8.9 billion euros to the Netherlands, and the Netherlands exported 14.2 billion to Poland. And if you compare that to other countries, or to give it a, let's say, European or international comparison, that would make Poland would be the 8th export destination for the Netherlands, and the 10th import partner for the Netherlands. And the Netherlands would even be higher up. So that would be the 5th export destination for Poland, and the 6th import destination for Poland. So those are the figures. I think it looks quite interesting.
It is, and let's take a look. If you can bring us what sectors are actually. Is it more like services, goods, industry? Where are these figures come from?
So if you look at what Poland buys from the Netherlands, then I think manufactured goods and machines would be the major products and goods that are coming to Poland. So then you're talking about electrical equipment, but also transport machinery, machines that allow Poland to produce high-tech and large quantities, as Poland is quite good at that. But also agriculture, I would say, is also an important one. And the third one I would mention as, let's say, an interesting product for Poland, that is chemicals. Okay. So you talk about oils, you talk about soap, you talk about paint, pigments. Okay. So AkzoNobel is one of the large companies that. So that is what Poland buys from the Netherlands, and then what the Netherlands buys from Poland is a bit similar. But if you look at manufactured goods and machines, it's particularly furniture that is very large. Well, we all know that Poland is a
specialty,
large,
yes.
Yeah. But also livestock and agriculture is also quite large there. But the most interesting thing I would mention here, I think, is the services sector, because if that's about 4.5 billion, I think, total in trade of services between our countries, and actually there is a trade surplus for Poland.
Okay.
And that is IT services, shared services centers.
Also becoming our specialty.
And last but not least, transport and logistics, because Poland is the biggest transport and logistics, how would you say, hero in Europe. And that is definitely also seen and bought in the Netherlands.
Yes, so we'll discuss the sectors itself just in a moment, because I think that within each of the sectors there are a lot of interesting insights for both sides, Poles and the Dutch. Where is the scope and the potential for cooperation? But let's start also maybe with a question: how would you today define the nature of this business relations between Poles and the Dutch? Of course, you are as the embassy, you are extremely intense in organizing trade missions, both from the Dutch side to Poland, and I know that the Polish side also often. Just recently, there was, I think, one of the missions in the Netherlands in different areas. Yeah. So, how would you define the nature of the business cooperation?
Well, strong, because if you look at the volumes, those are really, really big. I would say pretty diverse, right? Because you see in services, but also in the types and categories of products, a large diversity. And still a lot of potential. So, and that is basically demonstrated also by the predicted growth. It's my prediction. It's not in the books yet, but it will take off even more. So those three characteristics I would give to say what our business relation look like with Poland.
But if we take a look on what attracts the Dutch investments, for example, to Poland, of course, I mean, in the sector of the transportation that you mentioned, of course, the location of Poland and the size of Poland probably is a factor here. But absolutely, if it comes to the services or other aspects,
well, what comes to mind immediately is renewables. So, but before I dive into that a little bit more, I would emphasize that, let's say, the engine block of our business relations is really transport, logistics, industry, and for Poland, services. You have Shell, Signify, TomTom. They all have their Heineken. They all have their shared service centers in Poland. So that's to do with, let's say, relatively high qualified staff for relatively low costs. Like Randstad is a Dutch company, also worldwide one of the largest. It's not surprising that they have a big office here, because that's exactly what their business is about finding that staff and matching that with companies or between companies. So that's the engine block. But there are a couple of emerging markets that are extremely interesting, and one of them is renewables. Offshore wind energy is one of the things that I would mention immediately. And another one is circular economy. And I would say, let's say, the more innovative ways of logistics and transport, because both of our countries are good at it. We have, of course, Rotterdam, Amsterdam. We have a very good infrastructure, and that matches very well with the Polish let's say, comparative strength in terms of transport and logistics. So those two are really working on innovations like intermodal transport and even Hyperloop. That's already starting, but also sustainable mobility. So you have electrification of not only personnel carriers, so electric vehicles, but also, let's say, medium and heavy duty vehicles. Trucks. So there are things really going on in those, but I could go on forever.
Yes. Okay,
let's limit the list of potential.
Yes, but let's keep it pragmatic then. For example, when you are organizing a mission, I think you have annual mission in terms of logistics and transportation from the Dutch side here in Poland. Yes. So what's the aim of such a mission? What are your business, your entrepreneurs looking for here? Those who are not here yet, because I think it's also significant that, Mr. Raben and the Raben company was one of the first, I think over here. 25 years ago, when there was, Poland was not at EU then.
Yeah, so you would be surprised how many Dutch entrepreneurs I meet that actually say, well, I came here in '89 and I burned all my ships and my bridges and I went to Poland. And I found some good business and often also a wife, and they stayed for a long time. So and Raben is definitely one of them, although they were even before that time they were here.
Yes.
What are they looking for? Well, there's a huge investment coming up in these renewables. This energy transition is going to take place.
Yes.
Poland has its commitments. Netherlands has its commitments. And what do Dutch entrepreneurs look for here? Well, they are convinced that they have a couple of key selling points, like in the installation, operation and management of wind parks. Right, so dredgers, but also cables, but also IT solutions. Because if you look at the Netherlands now, they have sort of refurbished their entire fossil industry fleet to cater or to accommodate, let's say, more operational and management and maintenance style fleet for offshore wind. So, and that's huge. So they are here to, and that's what we did in Serotsk, where we had the trade mission last, I think, July. Was it August? No, and in December.
Okay.
And there was a huge interest from. We had the largest trade mission ever to Poland in December. We had 47 Dutch companies. I have to say it was online for a large part, so that makes it easier to participate. But still, there was a lot of interest from Dutch companies. So that is definitely one. And circular economy, well, let's put it in a positive frame. I would say that there's a lot of low-hanging fruit in Poland. There's a lot of ground to be gained and prepared for that. And it's becoming more and more interesting also for Polish companies and entrepreneurs that they see, wait, we have the lowest raw material efficiency in Poland. That's what, yeah, I was surprised also to read it. But and with the shortage of raw materials or the interrupted supply lines, it becomes sort of a commercial necessity to look at ways of making that loop closed, right? And to smartly use raw materials and feed them back into the system. It's a commercial interest also.
Okay, so that's actually interesting because the other thing that I would like to ask you, it's nearshoring, right? Because of course, regarding what we have with COVID and the fact that a lot of international companies are looking for the new location somewhere in Europe, it seems that in general, CEE region seems to be on the radar. And how does it look from the perspective of your, for example, requests from the investors, maybe to you as the embassy, but also how does it link to what you've just said?
No, this is, well, what I said about this supply lines and many other factors. It's also about energy prices, transport costs, etc. But also strategic interests to make the value chain a bit shorter. You see that, well, very practically speaking, we've seen in the past months the number of trade requests that come in. About half of that is about we are relocating our production facilities from Asia to Europe, and we think that Poland is an attractive and interesting location to put our production facilities. How do you think about that? What is your advice, embassy? So that's, and we of course say it's a very good idea because I think it's there's a huge territory. There's a good. Well, I can go on about the advantages of doing business in Poland, but it's remarkable, don't you think? It's 50%. It didn't exist before the pandemic. So suddenly we see an increased interest in relocating to Poland. And we haven't seen it really in practice or in actual, apart from, for example, Dutch companies who have already a couple of years ago, for other reasons like labor costs or the facilities or the location you mentioned, geographical location. Poland as the gateway to the east. And that's also something with in the rail freight sector, for example.
Yes.
It's really interesting for Dutch companies who want to produce their products in Poland. So we see that already, but I'm predicting, an increase in that regard.
Well, probably, especially that also I think that, with Fit 55 and the new tax, frame in terms of, importing goods from Asia, China.
Yeah.
So from the economies which are not that balanced in terms of the energy as we would like to, and we request in EU, then it also a factor that the cost of bringing stuff to Europe will be growing. So in this regard, as the demands and comes from European countries.
Maybe a carbon border tax as well.
Yes, exactly. That's what I also mean. Exactly.
Yeah.
That also seems to open a lot of opportunities.
That will push that development that we now see emerging. I think they'll push it even more. I agree with you. Yeah.
Okay, so I understand that, just to make a little summary of this, our part, I think there is a big potential, especially, in cooperation, but also driven by a lot of know-how that comes from the Dutch side, because of course, in terms of the agriculture, sustainable agriculture, or in terms of the mobility or renewable energy, you are advanced and you know you can be supportive in terms of implementation of a lot of solutions, not only even on the nation scale, but also on the business scales. I know that this market in Poland, in terms of because a lot of corporates, multinationals, they have, their own ambitions in terms of coming to net zero. And as far as I know, also, if they invest in Poland, their facilities are really advanced, and actually they can on their own a little bit catch to this trend and also answer the demand coming from.
I remember that we went to Rzeszów together with the mission.
That's where we met.
That's where we met, actually. And the mission from Enschede came there to see and with their own eyes what's happening there in the aviation valley.
Yes.
And it's really high tech. We were in white suits and with special, and it was all a sterile environment, and it was amazing. It was really, really interesting to see what's happening there.
And what was actually interesting for me, because of course Enschede, as the Dutch city, it's very much into the drone and aviation as well, but drone as a major sector, right, to grow.
Yeah.
And Rzeszów, and as far as I remember, Rzeszów and Enschede are the twin cities, and actually the request came from the Enschede side, which is quite surprising. Because
I didn't know about that at all. It was the drone. There was a drone cooperation there. It was very interesting.
So it just shows that actually this know-how exchange can go both directions.
Yes, I'm totally convinced about that. Poland is a very attractive economy for its dedication and its, let's say, labor ethics, but also about know-how and technology. It's getting stronger and stronger, especially in logistics, logistic systems, but IT is another one, which is growing very fast, and it's the Dutch are looking at that also with interest. Also financial sector. You have ING, Nationale Nederlanden, NN, Aegon. So it's really, and then as a location for production, for large-scale, high-quality products, manufacturing. So those are, I think, some aspects that are really attractive from the Dutch perspective, and we need the Polish investments and also participation in the offshore wind plants that we have now in the Netherlands. It's amazing what you see. It's now 10 gigawatts until 2030 that is being built, but they're talking about a doubling of that, which is, of course, with a larger time horizon. And we need the Polish expertise that they are now developing, but that's already there. For example, I came to know a very interesting Polish company who's in safety and, let's say, divers and transport from the shore to the installation to the wind parks. It's very specific, it's very niche, but it's something that that Polish company is very good at. And so they were immediately sort of invited to the Netherlands to come over and have a look. Port of Gdańsk was also invited to the Netherlands. They just had 2 weeks ago. They had even 1 week ago. They had a very good and fruitful visit. PGE also went there to have a look. So the cooperation is going. It's really two ways in the renewables. It's not that.
And I think that what is also interesting is that it's not only business and politics level, but it's also academic level, right? Because I remember even in Enschede, among the delegation, there were representatives from the universities. And from the perspective of creation of completely new ecosystem around this offshore, that also opens a huge opportunities for the universities also to be able to
thank you for adding that element, because I think that is something we have to do a bit more on, because we are tempted to look at business to business or government to government or government to business, but K to K or K to business or K to B, it's jargon, but we know what we're talking about. Knowledge institutions, to bring them also here is an ambition for next year for us as well. They call it in the Netherlands they call it the Dutch diamond approach.
Okay.
So you have this 4 side coin and or diamond, and then to really bring in at a very very early stage knowledge and education institutes to make sure that also the labor market demands and the ones and the education system itself are matched. Because now, especially in Poland, that's a problem, but also in the Netherlands, what the education system generates in terms of qualifications, competences, skills, doesn't always match what is needed. And so that is why we need to bring in, not only for innovation and technology, but also for education and labor market, we need to bring in knowledge institutions, but also educational institutions. So that's for me personally, and our embassy. That's an ambition for next year.
And huge potential, definitely.
Yeah.
Okay, so now two last questions as we need to finish. So if we could take a look at what Poles can learn from the Dutch and what can Dutch learn from the Poles.
Oh, well, I mentioned, I'm not going to repeat what I've already mentioned, because there's, in terms of expertise, there's a lot to be learned both ways, actually. So I would like to answer this question more in, let's say, business culture and what you have to look out for, what the do's and don'ts. And I think that let me start with this. When I came to Poland, I'm a Dutch guy. I'm totally used to an integrated, let's say, cooperative model. So within the business sector, we find each other. Within departments, we find each other. It originates from our fight against the water, that we are very used to cooperate. Even competitors are exchanging information, are sitting around the table together. So this is this consultative model, and that's something that is unique. I think, because I don't see it in Germany and France, but I don't see it in Poland. Let's say the natural inclination to talk in the branch, but also private sector and public sector, and to really make that so. That is something that maybe the Polish want to adopt. It takes time. That's the disadvantage, because if you have a more hierarchical model, then of course if the boss says go, then we all go. But in the end, it's more effective to have a critical mass of all the relevant players. So that's what I would mention.
And here I would just add that in the situation we are facing today, that everything will be like redefined.
Yeah.
I think maybe such an open approach and a lot of solutions on the table that you can really in the diversity way.
Yeah.
Discuss each of them.
Sylwia, I already see in the 2 years that I came here in February 2019, I see it already developing. You see the mentality, and because the world is simply too complicated. You need to work together on certain things, and maybe it's also from the Polish perspective, it also something to do with the history of Poland.
For sure.
So and for us it's different. So we would like to work like that. So that's something you have to bear in mind as a Polish entrepreneur. If you go to the Netherlands, it's a holistic, but the cleaner has something to say about what is discussed in the board. This is exaggeration, okay? But that's
of course, I get the picture. Okay.
Yeah, and I think what the Dutch can learn from the Polish is maybe their dedication and solution orientedness. We can find each other there, definitely, but it's very and there's so much entrepreneurial spirit and focus on development that is so fresh and eager, that sometimes I think that would be nice to have that in the Netherlands as well, a bit more than of course there's a lot of things and dynamics in the Dutch economy, but sometimes what I see around me here in Poland is really it inspires me. That's what both can learn. Then the other thing is contracts versus trust and a handshake. That's another one I always mention. You have to, in Poland, you have to really work yourself through a pile of paper and and negotiate. And by the way, negotiation skills is something that the Polish also have, and the Netherlands is much more, compromise oriented in a way that
looking for win-win.
yeah, but sometimes not in their self-interest. So I think we can learn something from the negotiation skills from the Polish of the Polish. But in the Netherlands, it's much more looking eye to eye and handshake, and we're good to go. So that is something that also I think should be known to both sides, basically, that you have to be aware of that.
Okay, so there's a lot of advantages on both sides, and if we bring it together, then the solutions can come much faster than we can expect. And of course, the areas which you mentioned, like circular economy, renewables, even the whole energy transition, which will also impact the logistics and the transportations.
And then we even haven't discussed agriculture and water, because that's also a big one.
We'll do an extra episode of that. Okay. So Sanne, thank you very much for bringing to us all these insights. I hope that they will be, inspiring for both sides, for the Polish and the Dutch. And I see that the opportunities are there. So it just and we are getting closer together also in because of the pressure from the outside. And I hope that this trend that you mentioned in the beginning will keep growing. And in 1 year we'll discuss even better statistics and better and much more case studies. As in working in practice on these sectors that you mentioned.
Thank you. Our business relations are very strong, but they will get even stronger. I'm very convinced of that.
That's a great one-liner for the end. Thank you, Sanne.
Thanks for being here.